Just a reminder, videos from here will be voiced by someone else until I get back. See you again in a few months.
Today we're covering more stories from history when normal people were pushed to their limit and finally snapped. Maria Octraiskaya. It's 1925 and a 20-year-old woman named Maria meets and falls in love with a handsome Soviet army cadet named Ilya Octraiskaya. They quickly get married and set out to make a life together in the city of Kiev. Maria loves her husband dearly, and she does everything she can to become a good military wife. She joins the Military Wives Council and even trains to become a nurse in the army. She proudly tells everyone she knows, "Marry a serviceman and you serve in the army." And Ilya appreciates the effort. As her husband rose through the ranks in the military, their lives became better and better, and they spent 14 wonderful years together as husband and wife. But everything changes in 1939 when World War II breaks out in Europe. And by 1941, the Soviet Union had officially joined the war. Ilya, now an officer, is sent off to the front lines, and as the Germans begin their invasion eastward with Operation Barbarossa, Maria is evacuated to Siberia. There, she patiently waits for a letter from her husband, but nothing comes. Weeks turn to months, that turn to years, and finally in 1943, she receives the news she had been dreading the whole time. Ilya was killed in action at the outbreak of the war defending their home city of Kiev. Maria is destroyed. The news of his death had taken 2 years to reach her. The hope she had desperately clung to was all for nothing. Instead of sinking into depression, Maria becomes enraged and is quickly consumed by thoughts of revenge. The Germans had taken everything, her life, her home, and now her beloved husband. They must pay! She sells all of her remaining possessions and donates all the money she has to the Red Army to build a T-34 tank. With her donation, she writes a letter demanding that when the tank is built, she will be the one to drive it. Surprisingly, the State Defense Committee agreed to this, and Maria is soon enrolled in a 5-month training program as her tank was being built. Upon her graduation, she's posted to the 26th Guards Tank Brigade, and when her tank is completed, she is assigned as its driver and mechanic. In memory of her husband, she has the words "Fighting Girlfriend" printed on her tank's turret. Oh man, I'm so excited to finally see our tank. We should name it something cool like the Widowmaker or the Red Hammer. You gotta be fucking kidding me. Her crew thinks this is a joke or some kind of Red Army publicity stunt. They can't believe they're gonna be stuck in a tank with some middle-aged woman driving them around. But Maria soon proves all of her doubters wrong. On October 21st, 1943, hostilities break out near Smolensk, and the Fighting Girlfriend is deployed into its first battle. Maria skillfully pilots her tank, and she and her crew successfully destroy a string of German machine gun nests and artillery positions. As she pushes onwards, her tank comes under heavy fire, and a shell disables one of her tank treads, stranding them in the middle of the battle. Disregarding orders, Maria rushes out to fix the issue. The Germans see her and unleash a torrent of gunfire at her position. She fixes the treads, jumps back into the tank, and drives away, saving her crew and earning their complete trust. After this battle, she is promoted to the rank of sergeant. A month later, on November 17th, the Fighting Girlfriend joins a night battle against a German position near Novoye Selo in the Vitebsk region. Maria's tank comes under heavy artillery fire, and once again, an explosion takes out its tracks. She and a fellow crewman leave the tank to repair the treads while their comrades provide cover fire from the turret. They're able to fix it and rejoin the battle. 2 months later, in January of 1944, Maria and her crew join another night battle near the village of Krinky. She skillfully drives her tank into position, and the Fighting Girlfriend opens fire and takes out a string of German defenses on the front line. For a third time, their treads are knocked out by an artillery shell, and again, without concern for her own safety, Maria leaps out to repair it. Under a storm of enemy fire, she once again manages to repair the issue, but this time, her luck runs out. Just as she is about to re-enter the tank, explosions erupt all around her. She's hit in the head by shell fragments and is knocked to the ground unconscious. Her crew members drag her into safety and retreat from the battlefield. She remained in a coma for 2 months until she ultimately passed away from her injuries. Her tour of vengeance had lasted just 1 year. Though her time in the war was short, Maria was posthumously made a Hero of the Soviet Union, a distinction equivalent to the Medal of Honor. Francois Lo, Okay, this guy is probably not what I would consider nice, but he definitely did snap, and it was one of the most extreme crash outs in history. In 1630, a boy named Jean-David Now was born in Les Sables d'Olonne in France. His family is dirt poor, so as soon as he is old enough, he is sold off into indentured servitude, and eventually finds himself in the Caribbean working on a plantation. There, he fulfills his obligations, and is released in 1650. Finally a free man, he wanders from island to island and eventually makes his way to French-controlled Saint-Domingue, an area in modern-day Haiti on the island of Hispaniola. There, he finds and is welcomed into a group of buccaneers. These men were originally hunters who had gained their nickname from the boucan smoking racks they would use to smoke the wild game they would catch. But by the 1650s, increasing Spanish pressure on Hispaniola had made hunting more and more difficult, and they were slowly forced to turn to crime and piracy to survive. Amongst this crew of hunters turned pirates, Jean finds the family he had been searching for his entire life. They give him the name Francois Lo, the French guy from Olonne, and he learns their ways of both hunting and pirating. For the first time, Francois feels alive. He's treated like an equal, and together with his new family, they go out on raids, hijacking Spanish ships throughout the Caribbean. Everything was great, until he lost everything again. 2 years into his new pirate life, Francois and his crew find themselves shipwrecked on the Yucatan Peninsula. While walking towards town to get supplies, they're ambushed by Spanish soldiers, and though the buccaneers try to fight back, it is a massacre. Only Francois manages to survive by smearing himself with the blood of his friends and hiding amongst their dead bodies. When the Spanish soldiers leave, Francois crawls out from under the lifeless bodies of his friends, and he turns to look at their mangled and contorted remains. The only people who had ever shown him kindness were all dead. And in this moment, something inside Francois snaps. The world had been nothing but cruel to him, and now he will return the favor. With the help of some escaped slaves, Francois rows a tiny rowboat back to Tortuga, a buccaneer sanctuary island. There, he is given a new ship and quickly recruits a new crew to enact his revenge against the Spanish. Instead of robbing ships, Francois targets and begins terrorizing Spanish towns and settlements throughout the Caribbean. Consumed with hatred, he brutally tortures and kills everyone he finds before taking their riches. This catches the attention of the Spanish administrators in the area, and the governor of Cuba sends a ship of 90 soldiers to Tortuga to capture Francois. This expedition ends in complete disaster, as Francois and his buccaneers capture the crew. As the bound Spanish soldiers are brought onto his ship and lined up, Francois stares with hate in his eyes and menacingly sharpens his sword. One by one, he personally beheads 89 of the 90 soldiers and gives the lone spared survivor a message for the governor of Cuba. I shall never henceforward give quarter to any Spaniard whatsoever, and I have great hopes I shall execute on your own person the very same punishment I have done upon them you sent against me. Francois continued to terrorize Spanish ships and settlements and quickly became infamous for the horrific forms of torture he would inflict on anyone his men captured. He would cut pieces of flesh off of his victims, burn them alive, and perhaps his piece de resistance. He would tie a thick rope around his victims' necks and tighten it until their eyes popped out. He took no prisoners, preferring to torture and kill everyone he encountered, leaving just one survivor each time to tell the tale. In 1666, Francois joined forces with another infamous buccaneer named Michel Le Basque, and together they raided the city of Maracaibo. When they discovered that most of the townspeople had hidden their gold and fled before they got there, he sent his men out to track them down and tortured them until they handed over all the wealth in the city. They then moved on to the town of Gibraltar, where despite being outnumbered, they massacred its entire garrison. They take the townspeople hostage and announce to the Spanish officials that they're holding the city ransom. This ransom is quickly paid, which annoys Francois, so he ransacks the city anyway. In his final act on this particular expedition, he plunders the native fishing villages in the area and sets their huts on fire, which seems completely unnecessary since they weren't even Spanish, but I guess was still completely in character for this guy. In 1667, Francois gathers another crew and sets out on an expedition to Honduras. After pillaging a coastal town, his crew is ambushed by Spanish soldiers, and he barely escapes with 2 hostages. They make it to a clearing, and he turns on his prisoners and slowly draws his sword. Wait, what are you doing? Oh God, stop! Show me how to get out of here, or I'll do the same to you. Holy shit! The prisoner helps Francois reach San Pedro, but from here on out, his luck seems to have run out. His future expeditions into Central America all end in disaster, and he is nearly killed multiple times by natives in the area. He is finally caught by the Guna people in Panama, who cut him to pieces alive, and then roasted the remains of his body until it was ash. These days, more people probably know of the anime character that was named after him than Francois Lo himself, but he will forever be remembered as one of the most terrifying buccaneers of the time period. Henry Barry Lowry. It's April 12, 1861, and 16-year-old Henry Lowry sprints across his father's farm, laughing as he tries to escape his brothers. The Lowry family are Lumbee, members of a North Carolina indigenous tribe, and they have lived in Robeson County for generations, eking out a simple living farming their land next to the swamp. But little did they know their world is about to change forever. At that exact moment, off in South Carolina, Confederate guns fire on Fort Sumter, and the American Civil War had begun. The Confederate Army begins forcibly conscripting young Lumbee men to build forts. The working conditions are horrible, and many Lumbee die of disease. Upon hearing about the awful conditions, and also not wanting to fight for a country that does not consider them as equals, many of the Lowry men begin to hide out in the swamp nearby. The war drags on, and their food and supplies begin to run out, and now they're beginning to starve. So, Henry begins to lead some of his relatives into town to steal from the wealthiest plantations in the area. Unsurprisingly, these guys do not like this one bit. Rumors soon begin to swirl around the town that the Lowrys are helping escaped Union soldiers and sheltering them in the swamp. And in response, the local elites decide that the Lumbees need to be taught a lesson. In 1864, the Confederate postmaster James P. Barnes accuses the Lowrys of stealing 2 of his hogs. He knows that a jury of local elites won't trust these free people of color, and this would almost certainly lead to their executions. Allen Lowry, the head of the family and Henry's dad, pleads with Barnes that he knows his family would never do anything like that, but Barnes doesn't want to hear it. He tells Allen he wants to go to the police, and Henry, who had listened to the whole conversation, watches his father slump in defeat as Barnes walks away. Henry's 19 now and has learned through the war that the Lumbee will never be treated fairly by these men. So, on the night of December 21st, 1864, Henry takes his rifle and finds Barnes walking home and blocks the postmaster's path. Seeing Henry's rifle, Barnes holds his hands up as if to say he doesn't want any trouble. But Henry has already made his decision. This man had threatened his father, and so he raises his rifle, takes aim, and shoots Barnes square in the chest. In the blink of an eye, Henry is now a murderer, an outlaw. But if this is what it takes to protect his family, so be it. With his last breath, Barnes shouts out, "The Lowrys have killed me!" Which was pretty much the worst thing that could happen when you murder a guy in a small town. Henry's plan of quietly taking care of business completely backfires, but without any direct proof that he was a shooter, he escapes arrest. All of the prominent plantation families are enraged and want the Lumbees taken care of, and to carry out their form of justice, they call on one of the most infamous groups in American history. Made up primarily of wealthy men who had bribed their way out of serving in the war, the Home Guard was originally formed to protect citizens and help with local conscription. However, by 1864, they had devolved into Confederate thugs drunk with power. Spurred by the murder of Barnes, they ride into Robeson County and begin harassing random Lumbees just to try to get a rise out of one of the Lowry men. The worst of the Home Guard is a man named James Brantley Harris, who begins assaulting Lumbee women. When Harris is warned to stop or face the consequences, he laughs and shoots and kills Jarman Lowry, one of Henry's cousins. Jarman's brothers, who were conscripted to build forts for the Confederates, return home to mourn their brother, but Harris finds them and has them arrested. He says he'll escort the boys back to the fort to resume their work, but once out of town, he beats them to death and claims that he only acted in self-defense. The courts do nothing, and Harris is a free man. Henry cannot take the injustice. 3 of his cousins have been murdered by the Home Guard. They can't keep getting away with this. So, a few days later, on January 15th, 1865, Henry picks up his rifle again and waits along a dirt road for Harris. After hours of waiting, Harris finally appears in his buggy, and as he passes Henry, the proud Lumbee points his rifle and fires. Harris is shot dead, and Henry has again doled out his own form of justice. He thinks things are now settled, and he can quietly return to his life in the swamp as an outlaw. But the act of killing one of the Home Guard was not something that would be so easily overlooked, and it would cause a retaliation so severe that it would turn Henry from just an outlaw to a nightmare for the local elites. On March 3rd, a group of the Confederate Home Guard raids Henry's father's farm. Henry stares from his hiding place while they trample his crops and search through the house. They find firearms that free people of color were forbidden from owning. Alan Lowry frantically tries to explain, but the Home Guard are not interested. They drag Henry's father and brother out of the house, and a kangaroo court is quickly gathered out in the open. They are convicted of thievery. The Home Guard brings them to the back of the farm, ties them up, and shoots them, while Henry watches, powerless. The Confederates smiled proudly at their work. They turn and leave, and Henry rushes to his father and brother, but there's nothing he can do. As he sits there with their lifeless bodies, Henry vows that they will be avenged. He gathers his closest friends together, and they steal a massive stockpile of Confederate guns in Lumberton and quickly begin to conduct larger and larger heists in the area. They specifically target the wealthiest plantations and begin giving food and supplies to the poor people in the area who are suffering the most from the war. His notoriety grows, and he and his friends become known as the Lowry Gang. For 2 years, Henry and his gang never kill, but they continue to steal from the rich, and he gains 2 contrasting reputations in the process: a hero amongst the poor and repressed, and a villainous outlaw to the rich elite. In April 1865, the South surrenders and the Civil War officially ends. Thinking the end of the war means a fresh start, Henry reemerges from the swamps and essentially disbands the Lowry Gang. But he soon finds that the plantation owners have no desire to let him off the hook for everything he had done to them, and they have him arrested at his wedding. His new wife helps him break out of jail, but Henry realizes that his dream of moving on peacefully had always been a pipe dream. He regathers the Lowry Gang, and they are done with pleasantries. In January 1869, the Lowry Gang goes to the local sheriff's home to rob him, and this time, they kill him in cold blood. They begin to hunt the most racist people in town, and they systematically execute them with no mercy. By 1870, the local police begin to catch and arrest some members of the Lowry Gang, so Henry goes and personally kills these officers too. Anyone who stands against them is their enemy, even the law. A bounty is put on Henry's head for $2,000. Wanted, dead or alive, this was one of the largest bounties in the county. But none of the poor in Robeson made any efforts to capture him, seeing Henry more as a hero than a villain. The police respond with an equal level of savagery, and begin killing anyone even suspected of helping the Lowry Gang, and Henry is always quick to return the favor. Henry continued to raid plantations and share the loot with the poor in Robeson, and as hard as the authorities tried, the Lowry Gang was simply always one step ahead. So in July, Francis Wishart, the new lead in the case against the Lowrys, stoops to the unthinkable. He orders the capture of the wives of the Lowry Gang. As Wishart and his men are walking the wives to the train, Henry orders a full-on attack. Shots are fired out from the swamp, and 6 of Wishart's men fall before he is able to escape with his hostages. On July 14th, Henry and a few of his lieutenants emerge from the swamp and appear at the estate of a powerful plantation owner. Henry and his men politely ask to be served breakfast, and the terrified family comply. After eating, Henry asks for some pen and paper. He scribbles a note and then hands it to the plantation owner and leaves with his men, thanking the family for the delicious meal. When the gang leaves, the family nervously opens the note, and they are chilled to the bone upon reading it. The bloodiest times will be here than ever was before if their wives are not released in 3 days. The countdown has begun, and now the local elites begin to beg Wisher to release the Lumbee wives, but he refuses. 3 days pass, and as promised, Henry kills 2 more townspeople, and the promise of future violence terrifies all of the citizens of Robeson County so much that a group of them releases the wives of the Lowry gang without even consulting Wishart. The government raises the bounty on Henry's head to $12,000, which is about $300,000 in today's money. Bounty hunters try to pry information out of the poor people in town, but nobody is willing to talk. Sensing the increasing pressure, Henry calls his gang together, and they decide the time has come to plan one final job. On February 16, 1872, they steal $22,000 from the Pope and McLeod store in Lumberton, the biggest heist they ever pulled off. This time, the spoils from this heist were not shared with the community, and in fact, this is the last anyone ever officially hears from Henry Barry Lowry. He disappears from history, leaving behind nothing but rumors. Some say he accidentally shot himself cleaning his gun. Some say he ran west and lived out the rest of his days on the frontier. Only 2 things can be confirmed since his disappearance. His wife never remarries or discloses what she thinks happened to him, and no one ever claims the $12,000 bounty on his head. So that's the story of Henry Barry Lowry, the Robin Hood of Robeson County. Not sure if he was a hero because he did kind of murder a lot of people, but let us know what you think or what stories you want us to cover in future videos in the comments below.